Major Christopher Mills rubbed his tired eyes as he stared through the thick glass of Fortress Alpha's observation deck. The endless sea of stars stretched out before him, each point of light a reminder of how far humanity had come. The massive space station, built into the heart of an asteroid, was humanity's proudest achievement. For 15 years, it had stood as an unbeatable guardian against the alien threats that lurked in the darkness of space. The soft hum of the station's shields was always present, like a gentle lullaby that had become part of daily life. Christopher had served on this station for 8 years, and in all that time, no enemy had managed to even scratch its outer defenses. The Zarkax Empire, humanity's greatest enemy, had tried and failed so many times that they had stopped their attacks entirely for the past 3 years. Major Mills, the shield upgrade reports are ready for your review. Lieutenant Amy Watson's voice broke through his thoughts. She walked onto the observation deck, her boots making soft clicking sounds against the metal floor. In her hands, she held a tablet displaying complex energy readings. Christopher turned to face her, grateful for the interruption from his deep thoughts. "How are the new modifications holding up?" he asked, taking the tablet from her hands. "Better than expected, sir," Amy replied, moving to stand beside him at the window. "The energy efficiency is up by 28%, and the coverage is now at 99.98%. She pointed to a graph on the screen, showing steadily rising lines. The station's eye, which everyone called Guardian, spoke through the room's speakers. "Shield integrity is at optimal levels, Major. All systems are functioning within expected parameters." Christopher nodded, satisfied with the report. Fortress Alpha was not just any space station. It was humanity's most advanced defensive position. Built at the edge of human space, it protected their colonies from alien invasions. Its walls were made of reinforced quantum steel, and its shields could withstand the force of a small sun. The station had earned its nickname, the Impregnable, through years of successful defense against everything their enemies had thrown at it. The Major walked over to the main control panel, checking the daily security logs. 5,000 people lived and worked on Fortress Alpha. Scientists, soldiers, engineers, and support staff. All of them depended on the station's defenses to keep them safe. The responsibility weighed heavily on Christopher's shoulders. "Lieutenant Watson, have the patrol ships reported anything unusual?" he asked, scrolling through the sensor data. Amy shook her head. "No, sir. All quiet in every sector. The long-range scanners are clear, and our automated defense satellites haven't picked up any suspicious activity." Christopher knew he should feel relieved, but something bothered him. Maybe it was the years of military training, or perhaps just instinct, but the prolonged peace made him uneasy. The Zarkax were not known for giving up easily. "Run a full diagnostic on the sensor array," he ordered, "and double-check the quantum radar calibration. I want to make sure we're not missing anything." "Do you suspect something, sir?" Amy asked, already typing commands into her tablet. Christopher stared back out at the stars. The Zarkax have been too quiet lately. 3 years without a single probing attack. That's not their style. Guardian's voice chimed in again. "Major, based on historical data, the current period of inactivity is indeed unusual. However, all defensive systems are operating at peak efficiency. The probability of a successful attack against our current defenses is less than 0.001%. The Major managed a small smile. The AI's confidence was well-founded. Fortress Alpha was the most powerful defensive structure humans had ever built. Its shields had never failed, its walls had never been breached, and its weapons had never met an enemy they couldn't defeat. Still, as Christopher looked out at the vast emptiness of space, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. The stars seemed to twinkle back at him, keeping their secrets hidden in the darkness between them. "Stay alert, Lieutenant," he said finally. "Sometimes the greatest danger comes when we think we're most safe." Amy nodded seriously, understanding the wisdom in his words. Together, they stood watching the stars, the mighty fortress humming around them, its shields glowing with promised protection. Neither of them could have known that they were standing at the edge of a storm that would shake their indestructible world to its very foundation. Lieutenant Peter Rodriguez sat at his sensor station, fighting to keep his eyes open during the quiet night shift. The soft beeping of the equipment had almost lulled him to sleep when a sudden alert jolted him awake. 3 unknown ships had appeared at the edge of the system. Guardian. Analysis of the unknown vessels, Peter called out, his fingers flying across the control panel. The station's AI responded immediately. Ships match known Zarkak scout vessel configurations. However, energy readings show significant modifications to their standard design. Peter pressed the comm button. Major Mills to the command center. We have Zarkak's activity. Within minutes, Christopher Mills rushed into the room, followed closely by Lieutenant Amy Watson. They gathered around the main display screen, watching the 3 dots that represented the alien ships. What are they doing? Christopher asked, studying the sensor readings. Just sitting there, sir, Peter replied. They're just outside our defensive perimeter. Wait. He leaned closer to his screen. I'm picking up some strange energy patterns. Nothing I've seen before. The Zarkak ships were sleek and black, barely visible against the darkness of space. Their curved hulls absorbed most sensor scans, but something about them was different this time. Faint purple energy flickered across their surfaces like lightning. Guardian, can you identify that energy signature? Christopher asked. Negative, Major. The energy pattern does not match any known Zarkak's weapon systems. However, I am detecting microscopic fluctuations in our shield harmonics whenever the energy pulses. Amy moved to her tactical station. Sir, should we raise the alert level? Christopher thought for a moment. Yes, sound yellow alert. Wake up our day shift crew. I want extra eyes on this. As the alert siren echoed through the station, more crew members arrived at their posts. Among them was Dr. Lisa Cooper, who immediately began analyzing the sensor data. On the main screen, they watched as one of the Zarkak ships moved slightly closer. A beam of purple energy shot out from its bow, disappearing long before it reached the fortress's shields. That's odd, Peter said, frowning at his readings. The energy beam dissipated, but there's something wrong with these numbers. Before he could explain further, the command center's doors slid open. Commander Kirell's hologram appeared in the middle of the room. The Zarkak's leader stood nearly 8 feet tall, his scaled skin reflecting the light. 4 arms crossed over his armored chest. Greetings, Fortress Alpha. Kirell's translated voice filled the room. It has been some time since our last meeting. Christopher stepped forward. Your ships are in restricted space, Commander. State your purpose. The alien commander's mouth curved into what might have been a smile. Merely a courtesy call, Major Mills. We wanted to test some new scanning equipment. I trust you don't mind. Any weapons discharged near this station will be considered an act of aggression, Christopher warned. Kirell's laugh was like grinding metal. Weapons? No. We learned long ago that your fortress is, what do you humans call it? Ah yes, indestructible. We're simply gathering data. Guardian's voice cut through the conversation. Major, shield harmonics are showing increasing instability. The fluctuations appear to be growing stronger. You seem concerned, Major, Kirell said, his hologram flickering. Surely the mighty Fortress Alpha isn't worried about a few scout ships. Christopher's eyes narrowed. Your ships have 1 minute to withdraw, Commander. After that, we will consider this an hostile action. Of course, Kirell said, waving one of his 4 hands dismissively. We've seen what we needed to see. Until next time, Major Mills. The hologram disappeared, and on the screen, the 3 Zarkak ships turned and vanished into faster-than-light speed. Sir, Peter called out, those energy readings, they were like nothing in our database. But for a moment, just before they left, I thought I saw. Peter shook his head. It was probably nothing. Just a ghost in the sensors. but it looked like the energy was synchronizing with our shield frequency. Christopher stared at the now empty space where the Zarkak ships had been. The uneasy feeling in his stomach had grown stronger. Something about this visit wasn't right, but he couldn't put his finger on what. "Log everything," he ordered. "Every reading, every scan, every energy spike. And get me a full shield diagnostic. I want to know exactly what those purple beams were doing." As the crew rushed to follow his orders, the mighty fortress continued its orbit, its shields glowing as strongly as ever. But somewhere, deep in the quantum matrix of those supposedly impenetrable defenses, something had changed. Something too small for anyone to notice. Dr. Lisa Cooper hadn't left her lab in 20 hours. Empty coffee cups littered her desk, and her eyes were red from staring at screens. But she couldn't stop, not when she was so close to understanding what the Zarkak ships had done to their shields. "Guardian," she called out, rubbing her tired eyes. "Show me the shield readings from the last 3 Zarkak's visits again. Layer them on top of each other." The AI displayed 3 sets of data on her main screen. At first glance, they looked normal, just the usual ups and downs of energy patterns. But Lisa had noticed something in the background noise, something that shouldn't be there. "Now add the readings from yesterday's visit," she said, leaning forward in her chair. A 4th layer appeared on the screen. Lisa's heart began to beat faster as she saw the pattern emerge. "Guardian, zoom in on the quantum level variations. Increase magnification by factor 1000. What she saw made her stomach drop. The shield's quantum matrix, the invisible pattern that made their defenses so strong, was changing. The changes were tiny, almost impossible to spot. But they were there, growing with each Zarkak's visit. "This can't be right," she muttered, double-checking her calculations. "Guardian, how long would it take for these changes to affect shield strength?" "Processing," Guardian replied. "At current degradation rates, shield efficiency would drop by 0.01% every 3 months. Lisa shook her head. "That's not the whole picture. Look at how the damage points link up." She drew lines between the affected areas on her screen. "They're not random. They're creating a pattern." She grabbed a fresh cup of coffee and took a long drink. The Zarkaks weren't just damaging their shields. They were weaving a web of weak points. Each visit added new threads to the web, too small to trigger any alarms. "Major Mills needs to see this now," she said, saving her findings to a datapad. She rushed out of her lab and headed for the command center. The corridors of Fortress Alpha were quiet at this early hour. Most of the crew was asleep, trusting in their impenetrable shields to keep them safe. Lisa's footsteps echoed as she ran, her heart pounding with the urgency of her discovery. She burst into the command center, where Christopher Mills was reviewing the morning reports with Lieutenant Watson. "Major," Lisa called out, trying to catch her breath. "We have a serious problem." Christopher looked up, concerned by the worry in her voice. "What is it, Doctor?" Lisa connected her datapad to the main display. "The Zarkaks aren't testing our shields. They're destroying them. Look at these patterns." The screen filled with her analysis. She pointed to the web of connections between the damage points. "Each time they visit, they create new quantum-level breaks in our shield matrix. They're like tiny cracks in a window. One crack isn't dangerous, but enough of them in the right pattern. And the window shatters," Christopher finished, understanding dawning on his face. "Exactly," Lisa nodded. "Their purple energy beams weren't weapons or scanners. They were more like knives cutting microscopic lines in our shields." Amy moved closer to the screen. "How long until these cracks become dangerous?" "That's the problem," Lisa said. "The damage is growing faster than Guardian predicted. The cracks are starting to connect with each other. If the Zarkaks hit these weak points with enough force." Suddenly, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Peter Rodriguez's voice came over the speakers, tight with fear. "Major Mills to the sensor station immediately. Multiple Zarkak ships just dropped out of faster-than-light speed. It's It's their entire fleet, sir. Christopher's face hardened as he looked at the tactical display. Hundreds of Zarkak's warships were appearing around the fortress, their hulls glowing with the same purple energy they'd seen before. "Doctor," he said quietly, "how much time do we have before our shields fail?" Lisa looked at her calculations one more time, her face pale. "If they know exactly where to hit us, minutes, maybe less." The mighty fortress, humanity's greatest defense, the station they'd thought was indestructible, suddenly felt very fragile indeed. And as the Zarkak's fleet moved into attack position, Lisa realized they'd all underestimated their enemy. The aliens hadn't spent 3 years giving up. They'd spent it finding the perfect way to bring down Fortress Alpha's shields. Now they were ready to prove that even the strongest fortress could fall, if you knew exactly where to strike. Chief Engineer Daniel Wright watched in horror as red warning lights flashed across his engineering console. The Zarkak's fleet had surrounded Fortress Alpha, their ships forming a perfect sphere around the station. Each alien vessel pulsed with the same purple energy they'd seen during the scout visits. "All hands to battle stations." Major Mill's voice echoed through the station speakers. "This is not a drill. Repeat, all hands to battle stations." Daniel's fingers flew across his control panel as he diverted more power to the shields. "Guardian, status report on shield integrity." "Shield matrix showing increasing strain." The AI responded. "Multiple weak points detected. Attempting to compensate." On the main view screen, the first wave of Zarkak ships opened fire. Their weapons weren't the usual energy beams or missiles. Instead, thin purple lasers struck the fortress's shields with surgical precision. Each beam hit exactly where Dr. Cooper had found the quantum-level damage. "They're targeting the weak spots," Daniel shouted into his comm. "The shield harmonics are falling apart." In the command center, Christopher Mills watched as their supposedly indestructible defenses began to fail. "Lieutenant Watson, return fire. Target their lead ships." Amy's hands moved quickly over the weapons console. The fortress's massive gun batteries came to life, sending bright blue energy beams toward the Zarkak's fleet. But the alien ships were ready. They moved in perfect coordination, letting the fortress's weapons hit their strongest shields while continuing their precise attacks. "Sir," Peter called out from his sensor station, "their weapons, they're not trying to overpower our shields. They're making the quantum damage worse. It's like they're pulling apart a sweater by finding the loose threads." Dr. Cooper rushed between monitoring stations, trying to find a way to stabilize the shields. "The cracks are spreading too fast. We can't repair them quickly enough." In engineering, Daniel watched as shield strength dropped faster than he'd ever seen. The mighty defenses that had protected them for 15 years were unraveling before his eyes. Warning alarms screamed as sections of the shield grid started to fail completely. "Major," Daniel reported, his voice tight with stress, "we're losing whole sections of the shield matrix. I've never seen anything like this. It's like they found exactly the right frequency to tear our shields apart." Commander Xurel's hologram appeared again in the command center, his 4 arms spread wide in a gesture of triumph. "Your fortress is strong, humans, but strength means nothing if you don't understand your own weaknesses. For 3 years, we studied. We learned. We found the tiny flaws in your perfect defense." Christopher glared at the alien commander. "Fortress Alpha won't fall so easily, Xurel. It already is falling." Xurel replied calmly. "Look around you." The station shook as another section of shields collapsed. Through the observation windows, they could see the purple beams cutting through their defenses like hot knives through butter. The Zarkak ships moved in perfect sync, each blast precisely targeted. "Guardian," Daniel called out desperately, "rear out all available power to the shields." Unable to comply, Guardian responded. "Shield matrix collapse at critical levels. Estimated time until complete failure, 3 minutes." In the command center, Christopher made a quick decision. "Begin evacuation procedures." Get all non-essential personnel to the escape pods. Dr. Cooper, Lieutenant Watson, start downloading the quantum data core. We can't let that fall into their hands. The fortress shook again, harder this time. Sparks flew from overloading consoles as more shield sections failed. The Zarkek's fleet pressed their attack, their purple beams finding every weakness, every tiny crack their scout ships had created. Daniel watched his engineering displays in disbelief as the impossible happened. Fortress Alpha's main shield generator began to overload. The quantum matrix, stressed beyond its limits, was starting to tear itself apart. "Major," he reported, his voice barely a whisper, "we're about to lose everything. The shields, they're going to fail completely." The mighty fortress, pride of humanity's defenses, trembled as its shields flickered and died section by section. The Zarkek's fleet closed in, their purple weapons still firing, still finding every weakness. And for the first time in 15 years, Fortress Alpha was about to be exposed to direct enemy fire. The Indestructible was about to be destroyed. The sound of tearing metal echoed through Fortress Alpha as the last shield sections failed. Red emergency lights flashed everywhere, and the evacuation alarm's deep tone filled every corridor. Major Christopher Mills stood in the command center, watching as thousands of crew members rushed to the escape pods. "Status report," he shouted over the noise. "Shields are completely down." Peter Rodriguez answered from his station. "First wave of Zarkek's boarding ships approaching. They'll breach the outer hull in 2 minutes." Christopher turned to his remaining crew. "Lieutenant Watson, Dr. Cooper, how's the data transfer coming?" 30% complete, Lisa replied, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "But it's not fast enough. The quantum data core contains too much information." Amy Watson looked up from her security screens. "Sir, first group of escape pods launching now. But we've got Zarkek's fighters moving to intercept." The fortress shook as the first Zarkek's boarding ships attached themselves to the outer hull. The sound of cutting tools filled the air as they began burning through the station's walls. "Guardian," Christopher called out, "initiate Defense Protocol Omega. Seal all corridors leading to the quantum core." "Acknowledged," the AI responded. "Heavy blast doors activated. But I must warn you. My sensors detect Zarkek's forces have breached multiple outer sections. They are moving inward rapidly." Daniel Wright's voice came over the comm system. "Major, engineering is about to be overrun. We've got wounded down here. Request immediate support." Christopher made a quick decision. "Lieutenant Watson, take a security team to engineering. Get our people out of there. Everyone else who's not essential to the data transfer, evacuate now." The command center crew hesitated. Peter spoke up first. "Sir, with respect, we're staying. Someone needs to protect the quantum core." More explosions rocked the station as Zarkek's forces pushed deeper into the fortress. Through the observation windows, they could see escape pods racing away from the station, some making it to safety while others were caught by enemy fire. "Data transfer at 45%, Lisa announced. "Guardian, can we speed this up?" "Negative," the AI replied. "Current transfer rate is at maximum safe levels. Increasing speed risks data corruption." Suddenly, the lights flickered. Daniel's voice came through again, filled with static. "Major, they've reached the main power core. We can't hold them back much longer." Amy's voice joined in. "Sir, we're falling back to secondary positions. Enemy forces are using some kind of advanced armor. Our weapons barely slow them down." Christopher watched his fortress, his home for 8 years, falling apart around him. The mighty walls that had never been breached were now filled with Zarkek's soldiers. The corridors where his crew had lived and worked were becoming battlegrounds. "Guardian, begin deletion of all non-essential data," he ordered. "Everything except what we're transferring. The Zarkeks aren't getting anything from our computers." Lisa looked up from her station. 60% transferred. "But Major, they're getting closer. I can hear them in the next section." The sounds of fighting grew louder. Plasma shots and explosions echoed through the corridors leading to the command center. The handful of defenders left could hear the Zarkak's troops getting closer with each passing minute. "Peter, help me barricade these doors," Christopher ordered. "Lisa, keep working on that transfer. We just need to buy a little more time." As they pushed heavy equipment against the doors, Commander Curell's voice boomed through the station's speakers. "Your fortress has fallen, humans. Your shields are gone. Your walls are breached. Surrender now, and I will spare your remaining crew." Christopher looked at his brave crew members, the ones who had chosen to stay, to protect humanity's most important secrets. They were tired, scared, but determined. The mighty Fortress Alpha had fallen like paper, but its heart, its people, remained unbroken. "Guardian," he said quietly, "initiate final defense protocols, and send a message to Earth Command. Fortress Alpha has fallen, but we're not done fighting yet." The bang of Zarkak's weapons against the command center doors grew louder. The once invincible fortress had become a trap, and they were running out of time. The command center doors groaned under the constant assault of Zarkak's weapons. Major Christopher Mills and his remaining crew had pushed everything they could find against them, but they all knew it wouldn't hold forever. "Data transfer at 85%, Dr. Lisa Cooper called out, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. Sweat ran down her face as she worked to protect humanity's most vital secrets. Lieutenant Amy Watson had made it back to the command center with Daniel Wright and 3 wounded engineers. They had sealed every door behind them, but the Zarkak's forces kept breaking through. "Major," Daniel said, checking his tablet, "I've set the reactor to overload, but we need to hold them off for at least 15 more minutes before it reaches critical levels." Peter Rodriguez fired another shot through a small gap in the barricade as a Zarkak's cutting beam broke through. "We've got maybe 5 minutes before they get through these doors." Christopher looked around at his brave crew. They were tired, some were hurt, but none had run away. They all understood what was at stake. The Quantum Data Core held the defense plans for every human colony. If the Zarkak's got it, billions would die. "Guardian," he called out, "how many Zarkak ships are still around the station?" 328 vessels remain in attack formation. The AI responded. "They appear to be waiting for ground forces to secure the station." Lisa's computer beeped. 90% transferred. Just a little longer. The doors sparked as another cutting beam sliced through the metal. Through the growing gaps, they could see the Zarkak's soldiers. Tall, scaled creatures in advanced armor, their 4 arms carrying different weapons. "Amy, Daniel, take the left side," Christopher ordered. "Peter, you're with me on the right. Lisa, keep working. We just need to buy you a few more minutes." The defenders took their positions, weapons ready. They had gathered all the spare guns and power cells they could find. It would have to be enough. With a thunderous crash, the first section of the door fell inward. Zarkak's troops immediately began pouring through the opening. The command center filled with the sound of plasma fire and energy weapons. 95%. Lisa shouted over the noise. "Almost there." Christopher and his crew fought with everything they had. They used fallen equipment as cover, moving and shooting, making the Zarkak's pay for every step into the command center. But there were so many of them. Daniel was hit in the arm, but kept fighting with his good hand. Amy ran out of power cells for her rifle and switched to a backup pistol. Peter took a blast to his leg, but managed to drag himself behind a console, still shooting. "Major," Lisa's voice cut through the battle noise. "Transfer complete. The data is safe." At that moment, Commander Curell himself stepped through the broken doors. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, his armor more advanced than his soldiers. All 4 of his arms held weapons. "Impressive resistance," the alien commander said, his translated voice filled with respect. "But it ends now. Surrender, and I will make your deaths quick." Christopher looked at his wounded but undefeated crew, then at his tablet showing the reactor status. 10 minutes until overload. They just had to hold on a little longer. "Guardian," he said calmly, "initiate Protocol 0. Authorization. Mills final stand." "Warning," Guardian responded. "Protocol 0 will disable all safety systems and accelerate reactor overload. Station destruction will occur in 3 minutes. Please confirm." The Zarkax commander's eyes widened as he realized what was happening. "Stop them," he roared. But it was too late. Christopher looked directly at Kirell and smiled. "Confirmed." The station's lights turned blood red. Guardian's voice echoed through every speaker. "Protocol 0 initiated. Reactor safety systems disengage. Time to critical overload. 3 minutes. All personnel should evacuate immediately." The mighty fortress was about to become a weapon, and its brave defenders had just started the countdown to its final act. Commander Kirell's face changed from triumph to fear as red warning lights flashed throughout the command center. The mighty fortress he had just conquered was about to become his tomb. "All ships, retreat," he shouted into his communicator. "The humans have set the reactor to overload. Get clear of the station now." But Major Christopher Mills knew it was already too late for many of them. The quantum reactor's energy was building up faster than the Zarkax ships could escape. He looked at his brave crew, Dr. Lisa Cooper, Lieutenant Amy Watson, Peter Rodriguez, and Daniel Wright. They had done their duty. The data was safe. "Guardian," Christopher called out. "How many escape pods made it out?" 4,312 crew members successfully evacuated. The AI responded. "Most are now beyond the blast radius. Time to reactor overload. 60 seconds." The Zarkax soldiers began running from the command center, all thoughts of victory forgotten. Commander Kirell stayed, staring at the humans who had turned their defeat into something else. "You'll die too," he said quietly. Christopher nodded. "Yes, but the data you wanted is already transmitted to Earth, and half your fleet is still too close to escape the explosion." 45 seconds to overload, Guardian announced. The station was shaking now, the reactor's power threatening to tear it apart. Lisa stepped forward, her voice strong despite her fear. "You thought our fortress was our strength, Commander, but you were wrong. Our strength was never in these walls." The Zarkax commander looked at the humans with new understanding. "You're all insane," he said, but there was respect in his voice. "No," Amy replied, holding her injured side. "We just believe some things are worth dying for." 30 seconds to overload. Daniel's tablet showed the reactor's power levels climbing far beyond safe limits. "Sir," he said to Christopher, "the explosion, it's going to be bigger than we thought. The quantum core's interaction with the reactor, it's going to create something new." Peter managed a weak laugh from where he sat, his wounded leg propped up. "Good. Give them something to remember us by." 15 seconds to overload. Commander Kirell finally turned to leave, but paused at the broken doors. "You've earned a warrior's death," he said. "Your names will be remembered in our histories." 10 seconds. Christopher looked out the observation window one last time. He could see the Zarkax ships trying to flee, their engines glowing as they desperately sought escape velocity. Behind them, the endless field of stars sparkled peacefully. 5 seconds. "Guardian," he said softly, "it has been an honor." "The honor was mine, Major," the eye replied. "Goodbye." 3. The crew joined hands, their heads held high. 2. The reactor's scream reached deafening levels. 1. The quantum reactor exploded with force beyond anything the engineers had predicted. The fortress's death created something entirely new, a quantum anomaly that twisted space itself. The explosion caught half the Zarkax fleet, destroying them instantly. The anomaly grew, making the entire sector impassable to any ships. Days later, when human rescue ships reached the surviving escape pods, they found more than just survivors. They found the transmitted data that showed exactly how the Zarkax had broken through the indestructible shields. Within months, Every human colony had new defenses against quantum resonance weapons. The Zarkax never tried to attack another human fortress. The price had been too high. The quantum anomaly remained as a permanent monument, its swirling energies visible from light years away. Ships had to plot new routes around it, and pilots called it the Hero's Wall. Years later, in the Great Hall on Earth, a new memorial was unveiled. It showed Fortress Alpha in its glory days, its shields shining bright. Below it were written the names of those who had stayed behind, and simple words that every child learned in school. The fortress fell, but humanity stood strong. Some walls are built of steel and energy. The strongest are built of courage and sacrifice. In the end, Fortress Alpha had taught both humans and aliens an important lesson. True strength isn't about being indestructible. It's about what you're willing to protect, no matter the cost.